Okay, let's take a quick look at what the iPhone has to offer when it comes to editing your photos. When you want to edit a photo, simply just tap the screen and the edit option up in the top right hand corner will appear. So let's go ahead and tap that, and that's going to bring up a row of bars and icons and tools that we can use to edit our photo. Over to the side, we have these three icons, and underneath these three icons, we have multiple tools that we can use to alter our photo. But let's go ahead and just start with the top icon and move our way down. So the first thing we have is the auto or the magic wand. If you tap this, the iPhone is going to automatically apply settings that it thinks makes this photo look the best. From there, if you drag this meter up or down, it will enhance or decrease the effect on the photo. And then if you tap the icon again, it will revert back to normal. Below that, we have our exposure. I recommend trying to get your exposure the way you want it the first time around when you're taking the photo, because in After Effects, if you try to adjust the exposure, it will make your whites look super blown out and it does not look very good. Little minor adjustments are okay, but try not to go to one side of the meter by an extreme amount. Next, we have brilliance. The iPhone isn't very clear on what brilliance is, but it looks like it's just adjusting the darkness and highlights and overall shadows of the image, making it look a lot more punchier and have more contrast, or a lot brighter and less dark shadows. Next, let's move down to highlights. Highlights is going to control how bright your highlights are or how weak they are. Under that, we have shadows, which is basically the same thing as highlights, but for shadows. You can control how deep or dark your shadows are, or you can reveal more detail in your shadows by going up. Next, we have contrast, just controlling the contrast of your photo. Brightness, pretty self-explanatory. And black point. This is going to control how deep and dark your blacks are, or if you want them to be a little bit more washed out. Next, we have saturation. If you go up, you can make it very saturated, or if you go all the way down, you can create a black and white photo. Next, we have vibrance, which is not the same as saturation. If you go all the way down on this one, you still have some color left in there, but it is very dull. And if you go up, you can make it very vibrant, making those colors really, really pop. Next, we have warmth. This just controls how warm or cold your photo is, basically controlling the white balance in the picture. If we go up, we can make our photo look really warm, or if we go down, it'll add some more blues and cooler tones to the photo. Next, we have tint. This is basically like warmth, but we have a purplish red tint or a greener, cooler tint. Up next is sharpness. This just controls how sharp and detailed your photo is. Definition, which is really similar, adding that extra crispiness to our picture. And noise reduction. If you have a lot of noise in your photo, which is those really grainy, colorful particles in your dark photos, you can use this and it will do its best to remove them. But I recommend not doing it too much, because to get rid of them, it just smooths out your photo. And if you pump it all the way up to the top, it'll just make your picture look really smooth and flat and end up looking blurry. And finally, at the bottom of this row, we have vignette, where you can put a dark shadowy ring around your photo, or you can put a light ring around your photo. Now, another big reason why I recommend not using filters when you're taking a picture is because after you take the photo, you can always go back and put a filter on if you want. Next, we see those same overlapping circles again, where we can apply any filter that we want. So like I said before, do not take pictures with the filters on. You can always apply them later. And finally, we have our cropping tool. If you simply just tap and drag with your finger, you can control the crop of your picture, but we have a few other options. First option is we can control the tilt of our picture. If our horizon line is a little bit crooked, we can use this to correct it and straighten it out. Below, we can warp the Y-axis or the X-axis if we want to distort our picture a little bit. Up in the top left-hand corner, we have two options. We can either flip or mirror our photo, or we can rotate it any way we'd like it. And finally, up in the top right-hand corner, we have different presets for cropping if we want to apply any of these to our photo. We have freeform, where you can drag your finger and create any size crop you would like. You can go back to the original size, or you can apply a square, and then you have all these different options down below it. That's pretty much it when it comes to editing with the iPhone. It gets the job done, but it can be a little limiting in certain ways. But luckily, we have a great alternative coming up in the next lesson. If you aren't familiar with Lightroom, Lightroom is an amazing software made by Adobe that you can download on your phone and edit your pictures. Lightroom has so much more to offer than the iPhone, and there are so many different things you can do to edit and alter your pictures. Lightroom is so extensive that it would take an entire another class to teach you everything that you can do with Lightroom. So in this lesson, I'm just going to walk you through my process of editing a picture and pointing out major differences and changes when it comes to Lightroom compared to the iPhone. And like I said before, Lightroom is a downloadable app you can get from the App Store, and it's completely free. There will be a few tools locked behind a subscription, but you can still create phenomenal edits without them. If you download the app, you might see that your screen looks a little bit different from mine, but I'm just using an iPad, so there are some slight changes when it comes to look, but you're going to have every single tool that I have. Nothing is going to be different. I just want you to have the best viewing experience. So with that being said, let's go ahead and jump on in and start editing this picture. When I edit photos, I like to start with the crop. So just like the iPhone, you can tap and drag and choose what you want your crop to be. But let's go ahead and tap on this, and it's going to bring down some different options we can apply. We can do the original, or we can do custom, or it has all of these different options we can choose between, just like the iPhone. But let's go ahead and go to custom, and I'm just going to bring the top down a little bit and bring the bottom up a little bit, just cutting out some of that dead space. Now here we have a row of some familiar looking effects that we had on the iPhone. We have light, color, effect, detail. Let's go ahead and tap on light. Once we tap light, we're going to have some more familiar effects like exposure, contrast, and highlights. I'm going to quickly go through and adjust these so my picture can look the way I want it. But before we do that, I want to point out the auto effect that Lightroom has as well. If we tap this auto, Lightroom will show you what it thinks looks the best, and it will put some minor adjustments on your photo to help. And we can go ahead and tap back and see the difference. Alright, I'm going to leave it off and adjust it myself. So from here, I'm going to go ahead and bring the exposure down just a little bit, up that contrast, bring the highlights down, bring the shadows up so we can see a little bit more detail in the dark shadows. Make the whites a little bit brighter and make the blacks a little bit darker. From here, if you go ahead and tap the screen and hold it, you can see the before and after and the effects you've made on your picture. Next, let's move down to color. One thing that Lightroom has that the iPhone doesn't, that I think is an amazing tool, is color selecting. So we have the basic vibrance and saturation. I'll go ahead and bring my vibrance up a little bit and bring the saturation down. But from here, if we click color mix, this little colorful circle right here, We can then change any color we want in our picture and only affect that color. So if we go to the blue, I want to make the blue a little bit more turquoise. And I'm going to go all the way to the left so you can see what I'm talking about. If I go all the way, you can see the sky is a lot more turquoise, and it only affects the blue color. But I'm just going to bring it over a tiny bit, and then bring the saturation down just a smidge. Something also really neat, if you go ahead and just double tap the cursor, it'll send it back to the middle to 0. Next, let's move into the yellow color, and I'm going to make my yellows a little bit more orange and warmer. Next, I'll go into orange and make my orange a little bit more saturated. Let's go ahead and take a look at our before and after, just to see our progress. Next, under colors, we have effect, we have texture, clarity, dehaze, and vignette. So I'm going to make the texture a little bit higher, just so there's some more detail in this picture. Here's another example of how you can do so much more with Lightroom. With the vignette, we can add a vignette, but we can also change the midpoint, the roundness, and how much it feathers out. There's so much more you can do with Lightroom and really make the picture you want in your mind. But I'm going to go ahead and double tap vignette to set it back to normal because I don't really want one in this picture. Now, another really awesome helpful tool I want to point out is this icon right here. If we go ahead and tap that, we can tap this plus sign over to the left and we can choose a paintbrush or a gradient. Now, if we tap the paintbrush, we can control the size of it, and then we can drag our finger and pretty much paint out an entire section. I'm going to go ahead and paint out the sky, and anything in this red highlighted area is going to be changed and nothing else. So now if we go into effects and we bump the clarity all the way up, it's only going to affect our sky, making it look a lot more dramatic and darker, giving some nice dark stormy clouds. This is one of my favorite tools to use in Lightroom, and I use it all the time. Another one, if we tap the plus sign again, we can add a gradient, and we can drag our finger from the bottom to the top and create a highlighted area that's more of a consistent line across. Next, let's go into light, and we'll bring our exposure down a little bit, making the foreground look a little bit darker, adding some extra depth. But when we lower the exposure, the colors do look a little bit brighter and more saturated. So let's go into color and bring the saturation down a little bit to match the rest of the picture. And that's pretty much it when it comes to editing on Lightroom. That was a quick edit, but that's kind of my process. This picture, I feel like, didn't need a whole lot done to it, and depending on the photo, it will need more time to edit. But this one I think was pretty good in the first place. But also, if you're still interested in filters like the iPhone, Lightroom also has some presets that you can apply to your photo. If you go ahead and tap this icon here, it'll bring up a bunch of presets that you can apply. I really like turquoise and red or warm contrast, but there are a bunch that you can choose from if you still want to stick with the filter route, which is totally fine. And lastly, if you edit a picture and you feel lost or confused and you don't like the direction it's going, if you tap this icon here, you can go back to original and hit apply, and it will start you completely over. And that's it. Lightroom can be a little bit confusing at first, but like I said, there's so much that goes into Lightroom that it would take an entire another class to teach you. So keep an eye out for that in the future. But the more you practice and the more you edit, the better you're going to get. So I recommend downloading the app and just jumping in and starting to experiment with your pictures. One more really awesome feature I want to show you that Lightroom has is how to create your own presets. This photo right here, I've spent quite a bit of time editing it, and I think it looks pretty good. But I have a few other pictures that I took of this chipmunk that aren't edited, and I don't want to spend a ton of time editing the same picture again, trying to get it as close as I can to this. So what you can do is, if you tap these three dots up in the top right hand corner and tap copy settings, you can then go through and check everything you want to be transferred over to the other picture. So I'm going to go ahead and check everything and then tap the final check mark up in the top. Once we have our settings copied, we can go over to this picture, tap the same 3 dots up in the top, and then this time tap paste settings. And there you go. All of the settings that we have on the first photo are now all on the second photo. But that's just how to copy and paste your settings. I'm going to show you how to now create a preset. If we tap the same 3 dots, under paste settings we have create preset. Here we have the same option to check as many options as we want. I'm going to go ahead and leave tools out because that's kind of like the cropping and I don't want to change the crop of the picture. I don't want to paste that over to every single photo. So we have profile color, light, color, effects, and detail. So we can go ahead and name our preset. I'm going to go ahead and just name this one warming. And then we can go ahead and tap check. Warming was now added to our presets. So if we go and press presets down here at the bottom, we have warming right there, and we can apply it to any other photo in the future. So once you start editing some pictures, go ahead and start creating your own presets. It saves you a ton of time when editing, and you can create a really nice library of beautiful edits.